All right. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Lakeland Rotary Club. My name is Joel Ivy, and I'm so glad you could all join us. Let's get this started. Can you call this meeting to order, Amanda? That was very timely done. Thank you. So we're going to start out with the invocation, Pledge of Allegiance, and we're going to recite the four-way test. We're going to be led through this exercise by our own Rick Maxey. Never mind what he's got on his head right now. Rick is the Assistant VP, newly appointed, I think, Assistant VP of Diversity and Inclusion at Florida Polytech. He's been a member of this club for about 2.5 years, and he's also a member of the okayest class ever for Leadership Lakeland. That would be 32. Rick, would you lead us in the invocation, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we have been shattered into pieces. Divisive patter has demeaned us. Let us commit to redeem peace around us in this city, in this state, in this nation. Let our faith bloom in the gritty places among all creeds and races. Let our Rotary service shine to all who observe us. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And let us recite the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
All right. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. Mr. Trey Harden is going to lead us in the introduction of guests and visiting Rotarians. Trey?
Thank you, Joel. If we have any visiting Rotarians or guests, I'd ask that you introduce yourself. I saw that Doug McCall was on the
Rotary Club of Wallasey in England.
Do we have anyone else?
Ray, this is Don Selvage. It's my pleasure to welcome back Carol Hornsby. She was a former member who took a hiatus, and she's now back. She now works as the marketing manager for Family Elder Law here in Lakeland. So, Carol, if you'll introduce yourself, please.
Hi, yes, Carol Hornsby. So glad to be back amongst some familiar faces. And just looking forward to becoming a part of this great Rotary Club again. I am handling all marketing for Family Elder Law, and formerly was a member of Rotary when I had Crave Fitness and Wellness, my personal training studio. So Don, thank you for inviting me back in.
Welcome, Carol. Do we have any other guests or visiting Rotarians? Okay.
All right. Trey, thank you very much. By the way, Trey is our board secretary. Always happy to have him on board. Step into our happy dollars. If anybody has a happy dollar announcement you'd like to make, please unmute yourself and let's hear it. I'd be surprised if we don't hear from Dorsey. He's been bragging about the temperature up there this whole time.
Hey, this is Johnny Tyler, and today's my birthday, and
Yay.
I am 64 today, and I am grateful for my health, and I'm grateful to be a part of Rotary, and you know, I just count God's blessings every day, and it even gets as grateful as being grateful for every breath I'm allowed to take. So for my birthday, we'll be submitting a check to Rotary Foundation, and it's another year around the sun.
Happy birthday, Johnny. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We're so proud to have you as part of our team, that's for sure.
Thank you, Joel.
Any other happy dollar announcements? Wow, quiet group. Just from an announcement standpoint, at the last board meeting that we had, the board voted to donate the remainder of our district designated funds, which was roughly $17,662 to a water project in conjunction with the Lake Wells Club. This is going to be in El Progreso, Honduras. I said Nicaragua before. it is Honduras, so we're happy to have that charge being led by Brandon Clark, doing a great job there. So Brandon, thank you. We're also going to adopt a fundraising goal to raise money for AEDs for the Lakeland Police Department. LPD would like us to purchase 25 more units and then put a little bit extra money into the coffers so that they can pay for batteries and patches, pads, and things like that associated with that. LPD is actually ordering AEDs as part of the standard package in all their new vehicles. So they're going to be taking this project over in total after we go through this investment. So it's our thought that we would make this investment and then walk away from that. So happy to have that partnership with LPD. Does anyone else have any announcements?
I would, Joel, just this is Trey, just wanted to remind everyone about the upcoming golf tournament on October 23rd out at Eagle Brook. And it will be benefiting Feeding Tampa Bay. And we're also going to donate a portion of the proceeds to help purchase the AEDs too, that Joel was just talking about. So we hope that everybody can come. We still are looking for sponsors and volunteers. We're probably going to need at least 10 or 15, maybe more volunteers, and still looking for players. I think we have about 66 players so far. And if you don't want to play in the tournament, we have a dinner following with a silent auction, and dinner tickets are available for $50 each. So we hope that everybody can make it out, and we're looking to have a good time.
Fantastic. Trey, I assume if anybody wants to get with you about sponsoring or anything else, they can just contact you. And I don't see the contact, but it's on the Rotary Club Runner, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's registration on Club Runner, and if anybody wants to just contact me directly, I can help you out too.
Okay, good deal. Thank you, sir.
Uh-huh.
This is going to be one of our main fundraisers, this and Springham Session. So we certainly encourage everyone to participate as much as you can.
Hey, Joel.
Yes.
This is Lori Gerard.
Hi, Lori.
I just wanted to announce that we did have STARS. We are inducting new members, so we're excited about that. We had our second STARS Zoom meeting this morning, just at 11 o'clock. So we are going to try to get them together in person if we can to discuss a project and all of that. So I just wanted everyone to know we are moving forward. We have about 13 new members coming in through the STARS program.
That's excellent. Thank you, Lori. Thank you for continuing to do that each year too.
Yes, with Marge Conley.
With Marge, absolutely.
Yes.
Mayor Mutz and I got the chance to participate with the new Leadership Lakeland Class 38. What a great group of people that is. They're going to do awesome things, even in this bizarre year that they're having to contend with. So let's put a lot of pressure on them and expect great things. Okay, so let's get to our program. The program is going to be introduced today by Heidi Waldron. She's probably the most introduced person that we have. Heidi is the Director of Development for Bonnet Springs Park. She's almost a one-year Rotarian, but she's on here quite a bit, and we're happy to have her on board. But coming up in November would be her 1 year. Heidi, can you do the introduction, please?
I can. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I am excited to introduce our speaker today, Trinity Laurino. She will be speaking to us about the spread of misinformation in the digital age and how understanding the media you can be savvier consumer of information and help prevent the spread of disinformation, which is super important. She is a first-generation college graduate and a native of Tampa. She earned her degree in electronic media from George Washington University in DC. She began her career at PBS, which is super awesome. From there, her career took her to National Geographic, which is also very awesome, where she opened the LA office for her division. And after 4 years in LA, she moved to BBC's Digital Motion division until she was lured away by Atlanta CNN. So she has definitely traveled. within the United States for her various career moves. She, along with her husband and her daughter, decided to leave the big city life for Lakeland because it felt more like community and closer to their families. She is currently the Community Engagement Director for Lakeland Now, as well as a Kiwanian, and serves on the boards of Pace Center for Girls and Lakeland Vision. Her husband, Michael, is an actor who can be seen in Nickelodeon's I Am Frankie on Hulu, as well as several TV commercials and independent films. Their daughter, Olivia, is a freshman at Harrison School of Arts. Welcome, Trinity. We are so happy to have you and excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. I hope everyone can hear okay. This is definitely the biggest group I have been in front of, so I'm going to try not to be too terribly intimidated by that and trying not to like futz with my hair too much as I'm like looking at myself on camera. So, all right, let me see about sharing my screen here so I don't have to stare at myself, because trust me, I do not want that. All right, so here we go. So we've got a little presentation for you. So this is actually, the title of this changed a little bit from to moving beyond fake news. Fake news was something, is a term that we hear thrown around a whole lot, and it's really used a lot of times to kind of subvert traditional institutions of, you know, news providers. And so we want to really kind of get beyond that whole, you know, idea of fake news and have a better understanding of what disinformation is and where it is coming from. But to begin with, I want to make sure everybody really understands. So hold on one second. Let me see. Can I get back and actually see what you guys are seeing? Or am I stuck in here? I can only see the gallery view. I can't actually see what you guys are seeing.
I don't know of a way to see
Okay.
what the participants are seeing, but your presentation is not in presentation mode right now. It's just
not. Yeah, I know. Okay, so here we go. Let's go into presentation mode.
Yep, there you go. Thank you.
All right, good. Thank you. Okay, so first, I want to make sure everybody knows what Lakeland Now actually is. We are a local nonprofit newsroom, and our mission is to cultivate civic engagement. And the way we do that is by reporting and curating on local news about the community. We are hyper-focused on Lakeland itself, and we are an open, user-friendly digital platform. And the reason we're open is we want to make sure every person has the opportunity to become an informed and engaged citizen. So again, what does all that actually mean? It means we have no paywalls. All the content is open and accessible. We embrace social media. We cross-post, cross-Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of it. We don't have subscriptions. We are supported through individual donors, grants, and our local business sponsors. And the other thing, those sponsors are all local businesses that we, you know, contract with, you know, individually, so you're not getting like a bunch of ads served to you through, say, like a Google AdWords platform. The other thing that I love about Lakeland Now is we do not have an opinion section, and that's really being driven by our editor-in-chief, who many of you may know. So this whole presentation is going to be about the importance of understanding the media and who's behind the media. So I wanted to give you a little introduction to who our editor-in-chief is. It is Barry Friedman. He founded Lakeland Now in 2015. So we actually literally celebrated 5 years on the 10th since Lakeland Now started. And Barry was, of course, at the Ledger for 30-some years before that. And he actually launched theledger.com and oversaw that before the Ledger's acquisition by the New York Times. So that is Barry. And I also love this quote by Barry that actually David Dickey, his colleague, posted to social media, and I stole it. And since Barry put up photos of him as a young man getting started off, I decided to include a photo of myself. This is me on graduation day. And since you already have my bio, I don't have to spend too much time on this, but yes, my bachelor's is in electronic media from GW. I spent a lot of time working in media, mostly in nonprofit media, almost always in revenue generating arms of those nonprofits. So I want to make it very, very clear, I'm not a journalist. I have a background in media studies, and I've always been really, really fascinated by the intersection of media and culture, but I do not handle the editorial for Lakeland Now. I do the fundraising to make it possible to have a newsroom, and I do community outreach to educate people on our mission and programs that further our mission of creating a more engaged citizenry. And that's really where this whole project came out of, that last bit. So that's me. All right, enough about me. Let's talk about all of you. How many here, and you guys can either raise your hands or put this in the chat or wherever feels the most comfortable, how many of you think you have ever shared misinformation online? And I'll give you a second to respond there. And then what percentage of people do you think have actually shared misinformation online? Do we think it's A, less than 30%, B, 50 to 60%, or C, 75%? So I've got at least one person raising their hand and, admitting to this right now. All right. So the answer is at least half of you probably have at some point. As far as the best research we have says by 2017, at least 2/3 of adults were getting their news from social media. We suspect that number has only grown in the last 3 years. Of the people who get their news from social media, about 60% of those have shared misinformation online. When people have other pathways to news, that percentage goes down a little bit, but it's still at 51%. So you can see this is a really pervasive problem. And the vast majority of those people don't know it's misinformation until after the fact. Some people are sharing it knowingly, even when they share it online. So what can we actually do about this problem? And I think the answer lies in kind of three things. There are three things that we really have to understand. We have to understand the way our brains process information. We have to have some, language for talking about misinformation, and we need to understand the nature of media. And we're going to try to get somewhere further along the lines on all three of those really big things in about 20-25 minutes here. I'm sure we can do it. So to really start having a language around this disinformation disorder, the main researchers in this have come up with like three really big topics to kind of, categorize all of the misinformation that's coming at us on a constant basis. And so the way that they're looking at it and categorizing it is in part off of both its falseness and its intent to, inflict harm, either to the body politic or to an individual. So we've got misinformation, which is unintentional mistakes and inaccurate captions and the things that can happen really easily to anybody just when we're being a little quick and not paying too much attention. I think this also includes when we recirculate things that are outdated. That happens a lot with celebrity deaths for some reason, but it can apply to other information as well. But then misinformation and disinformation become a very permeable sort of membrane here. So something that starts off as misinformation, a misquote or something like that, then can become disinformation if it's spread with a deliberate intent to manipulate public opinion. And then they created a whole separate category for malinformation, which is always intended to harm. And this is information that could be true, but is only shared because it is damaging to somebody's reputation. And so this includes things like revenge porn that might be posted, or it includes, say, the hacking of Sony and the releasing of their emails that embarrass the executives, or the hacking of the DNC. So that's really, really broadly kind of the world of disinformation that we're looking at. And so why is it so hard in this day and age to kind of wrap our heads around what is true? I love that Rotarians start off on that 4-point question thing with the is it true? So why is it to become so incredibly difficult to understand what is true versus, what is misinformation in this digital age? And I think there's a bunch of things that are actually working against us right now. You have, accelerated change across technology. So media platforms are changing, they're converging. You have a mistrust of institutions that's been exacerbated by both the kind of corporate consolidation. So we're very far removed from the people who are publishing and generating that media content now, as well as really a decades-long campaign. I mean, I think it's really a half a century-long campaign and goes back to the Nixon administration of sowing the seeds of distrust of traditional journalistic institutions. And then adding to that, you have a nationwide collapse of local newspapers. And that's really, if we think about the news ecosystem, that is a foundational layer that has been just folding in on itself for the last 2 decades. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But then in addition to that, you have the very way that human brains are wired to believe and share information. And so this is referred to constantly as confirmation bias. So it's, a well-researched fact that we share and believe information more readily when it actually confirms our existing worldview. And so that we can all understand, the way our brains process information, I want you guys to do a little exercise with me. I'm going to give you 2 facts, both of them very true, very verifiable, but I want you to do a little self-check-in and see how both of them make you feel and see if you notice any kind of different reactions between those 2 facts. And I have to warn you, I started off in natural history. That was really my passion. I love natural history documentaries. So my first fact is going to be about our lovely, wonderful little platypus here, which is that in addition to being one of the only egg-laying mammals, and certainly the only egg-laying duck-billed mammal out there, the male platypus is actually venomous. It has a little venomous spur on the back. And interestingly, that venom may hold a cure for diabetes. So that fact probably isn't setting off any alarm bells for anybody, because to the extent that you've ever thought about a platypus, you've probably thought of them only in the context of that's a really bizarre and strange animal. And while there's only a handful of venomous mammals in the world, finding out the platypus is one of them probably only confirms the idea that this is really a bizarre and strange animal. So not a whole lot of alarm bells there. The second fact has to do with that pair of teeth there. So a lot of us who, at least if you grew up here in the US, you probably learned at some point that George Washington had a set of wooden dentures. Well, he never did. George Washington actually did suffer from teeth problems his entire adult life. He had several sets of dentures. None of them were made from wood. They were made, however, from a mixture of animal teeth, ivory teeth, and in at least one instance, human teeth acquired from slaves. So this fact, if you've grown up with the idea of George Washington with this paragon of American virtue and values, that he was walking around with at least, 9 teeth from slaves, might start to, as my daughter likes to say, hit a little different. It might start to raise a few alarm bells and make you think, oh, wait, that can't quite be right. That doesn't quite mesh with my vision of who George Washington was. And we might try to find ways to, disallow that information to take hold. And that's really where confirmation bias comes in. So if we understand that that's the way that we're wired, then we can be more aware when we hear something that kind of challenges our worldview about something, and we can look at it with a little bit more curiosity. All right, so then the last part of the kind of those big 3 things that I want to spend the most time on is really understanding how the media actually works and how content gets delivered to you. This is a wonderful quote from Marshall McLuhan, who is the father of early modern media studies, that says, any understanding of social and cultural change is impossible without a knowledge of the way media work as environments. And I think that's incredibly true. And it also speaks to why this is such an important topic right now while we are seeing massive shifts within the culture. So I think one of the most important things to really understand when we're talking about media is to have kind of a shared vocabulary and understand the difference of platform versus publisher. And so I hear people say the media a lot when what they actually mean is the news. And the news is only one small part and portion of this bigger, larger thing called the media. And so the media really refers to any broad-based communication platform, and that covers print, broadcast TV, radio, cable, satellite, digital social media, and out-of-home networks, which means like billboards and closed-circuit TVs and things. But I really want to talk a little tiny bit, I probably won't spend too long on this, about the differences in regulation between all of those platforms. And so a lot of this has to do with where and how those platforms kind of like formed, essentially. So when we talk about broadcast radio and TV, and for people who are, say, younger than 40, you may not even be able to distinguish between what is broadcast TV and what is cable. But broadcast TV are, your big, what were initially your big three, and now your big four networks that used to be over the air. You just set up a TV, put the rabbit ears out, and they came into your home. No extra steps needed. And because those all use the existing radio waves for broadcasting, they could be regulated by the FCC. There is an underpinning logic there that says radio waves are a naturally occurring resource, and so just like water or electricity or anything else, the government gets to regulate it. So there's far more regulation on broadcast TV and radio. And really, local news reports are kind of born out of this regulation, because all those stations have to be licensed by the FCC, and those licenses come with a mandate to do some kind of a social good and provide some kind of community resource. And most stations will fulfill that requirement with both local news programming and often children's programming. When we get to cable and satellite TV, there's some regulation by the FCC, but because they're not relying on those naturally occurring airwaves, the content is not regulated there. The kind of regulation you get there from the FCC is really more regulation of the providers themselves, of Spectrum and Comcast and those guys, and more to deal with sort of antitrust issues. Now, when we talk about digital and social media, there is zero regulation. In fact, there is really, really broad-based immunity granted by something called Section 230, and I'm guessing you're going to hear a lot more about Section 230 in the next coming years. I think it's already been bubbling up a little bit, but it was written in 1996, before social media ever even existed, and when the internet itself was largely still in its infancy. And so it was designed to protect those early internet companies from libel lawsuits from people that they had no control over, who were simply publishing things to the web. And that's what that did. But that immunity has been expanded, and it's been pushed to its limits by social media. And so there is a big movement to try to reform Section 230. And then over the home network, there's really no, out of home networks, there's not any really regulation there, but it's primarily an advertising kind of a medium. But when we talk about the news, so those are the platforms that really deliver content. They deliver all sorts of content. And the news is just one type of content that might get delivered across this platform. So when we think about news, what we're really talking about are the journalists and the reporters who are in the field, who are doing the research and doing the live, the actual in the field coverage of events that are happening in our communities. And a good news outlet should abide by stated and transparent journalistic ethics. A big enough news outlet will employ full-time fact checkers and researchers, and they will issue corrections in a timely fashion. And there should always be transparency of company ownership and affiliations, or if you're a nonprofit, your sponsors, and who, basically who is funding and where the money comes from. So the other big issue that is, driving the misinformation or disinformation disorder is the loss of local news. Most Americans still trust their source of local news more than they trust any other form of local news. But since the early 2000s, we've seen a dramatic decline. And when we talk local news, what we really, really mean, the backbone of that are newspapers. The University of North Carolina puts out a report every year called the Expanding News Desert about the loss of local newsrooms and communities. And in 2018, they estimated over 1,800 American communities have lost every source of local news. And then about twice as many as that are being served by what are now being called ghost newspapers. So those are newspapers that are still putting out a daily edition, but the newsroom has been so dramatically cut and decreased that there's a lot of news that's going uncovered. And I think you can see that right here in our own backyard. In Tampa, where I was born in the 1970s, you had at least 5 dailies that were going out, and all of those have now been, have all converged into the Tampa Bay Times through mergers and acquisitions. And then here locally, of course, we have the Ledger, which in 2000 had 99 newsroom reporters and is now down to 12, I believe, currently in the newsroom. And then you had several others scattered throughout all of Polk County. And now we have, so we have the ledger, we have the news chief, Lakeland Now, we're here, and the Winter Haven Sun. And again, Lakeland Now, we focus solely on Lakeland, where the ledger has to try to cover all of Polk County, which is bigger than the state of Rhode Island, with just those 12 newsroom employees. So you can, kind of get, the way I like to explain this is local news is really like the immune system to the body politic. It is the place where corruption and graft and all these things can be ferreted out really early. And if you think about like some of the biggest national news stories that have happened, a lot of those bubble up initially from local news. You think about the Catholic Church pedophile scandal, that was the Boston Herald reporting. If we think about Jeffrey Epstein, to use a really early or really recent example, that was the Miami Herald that led the way on that one. And we go back to the Watergate. Back during Watergate, Woodward and Bernstein were beat reporters at the Washington Post, and the Washington Post was, at that point, not a nationalized newspaper. It was one of several newspapers within Washington, D.C. So you can kind of get the idea of like, as that ecosystem collapses, what that will really mean for the amount of reporters that are out there to be able to dig into these stories that then, go on to shape the entire culture. So this gets back to like, how and why is it so hard to sort of tell in a digital world? Well, for all of us who grew up still in that analog world, it was really, really easy to tell the difference between legitimate news and tabloid news. Tabloid news was highly sensationalized, always about celebrities or Bigfoots or aliens or things like that. And so these lines of demarcation were really, really clear. But in this age of convergence and everything gets shrunken down to the size of a phone, I think all of those, those visual cues that we used to rely on have kind of gone away, and everything sort of starts to look the same when you're looking at it online. But in this world of convergence, it really, you have to ask this question: who controls the media? And congratulations, it's now all of you. If you have a social media profile, you are now running your own media channel. So I think that means that we all have a deep responsibility to understand where disinformation is coming from and how we can, stop its spread. So part of the ways that we're seeing, and this changes and evolves, it's different now than it was in 2016 already, and it's going to continue to change and evolve where disinformation is coming from. But these are some things that are kind of, hold true. One of the things that we're seeing now that we actually didn't see in 2016 was that you are getting hyper-partisan sites that are popping up that are posing as local news. The Neiman Lab released a study about that. You can see the map down there. Fortunately, if you were to zoom in on that map, we don't see any in Polk County yet. But that's part of that loss of local news. So communities have lost the local news, and hyper-partisan sites are moving in and making it look like what they're delivering is local news. You also do, absolutely. We know this from 17 intelligence agencies. You have coordinated propaganda campaigns from foreign governments that are trying to have an effect on our elections. And so a lot of what comes out of that is false and misleading headlines that have a kernel of truth, highly manipulated photos and images. So actually this is something that spread through a lot of fake accounts on TikTok, and this was in the early days of Black Lives Matter protests in DC. There were people claiming that there was this giant fire going down by the Washington Monument. This was actually a picture taken out of the CBS series Designated Survivor. So how then does disinformation spread online? Well, when the main sources now isn't so much even things that look like news, it's through memes. Does everybody know what a meme is? Because if I have time, I have a whole separate mini deck on memes if we don't know what memes are, and I can share that too. And he uses some examples of what the Russians actually put out in 2016, which is fascinating. But if we have time, we can get to that. What time is it right now? Maybe. So like I said, you see a lot of fake accounts that are posting videos and social media. And the thing about memes particularly is as they move through the internet, they become essentially authorless. And so it's really, really hard to track where they actually start from. And then they get manipulated and they get changed. And so it's really easy to spread disinformation by using memes, because you can put something out through a fake account and then it sort of gets laundered through a bunch of other people until by the time you see it, it looks like your friend posted this, you know? And then the other big place that I've seen, especially around COVID, is the copying and pasting kind of, it's almost always a long screed from an unnamed source. Definitely saw this a lot around mask issues, and people were taking OSHA regulations out of context and posting them. And I always find it really interesting that behavior that we would never do in real life, we're very accepting of online. So if your friend came to you and said, oh, well, you know, my second cousin's boyfriend's friend said that masks don't work because he's a certified OSHA, regulator, and OSHA says all of this, you would treat that with a certain amount of skepticism because you're too far removed from the information. Yet when you see it posted online in the same kind of a format, it's been posted by somebody and then, you know, shared by somebody else and copied and pasted 6 times over, we somehow treat this as more trustworthy. I find that really interesting. So how can we actually evaluate a news organization and make sure that the information that we're getting does come from a trusted source? Well, there still are, even though we've lost some of those visual cues that we had back in the analog world, there's still a lot of things that you can look for online. When the first places to stop and check out is the about page of any organization. And these fake news sites that are popping up, they have next to no information on their about page. There's really not a lot of architecture to the website beyond just the actual news articles that they're pumping out. And so that about page should state a couple of really simple things. They should say what the organization's mission is, what its goals are, its editorial philosophy, and it should give you a clue as to how they're funded, or at least, you know, link to more information about how they're funded. I think it's also important when you're evaluating news sources to understand what they actually cover, because in this fractured media environment, you can find a news source that will cover just about anything through any particular lens, whether you want your news delivered to you through a feminist lens, or through a conservative lens, or through an evangelical Christian lens. You can find news sources for all of that. But you can also find news sources that will deliver you news through the entertainment industry's lens, or that cover just a specific location. And so I think a lot of times when people try to evaluate news sources, they're not looking at what it is they really, really cover. We see this from a Lakeland Now perspective of, you know, sometimes we get criticism for, say, not covering statewide or national events. And we go, we don't do that. You have other sources for that. What you don't have, what you're missing, is coverage on local news, on, you know, what the city commission is doing. So, you know, if the governor makes a tour through Lakeland, we would cover that. But other than that, state politics happens at the state level, and there are lots of other outlets that, you know, that will cover that. So the other really big thing, and this applies mostly, well, this actually does apply to print, but also a lot to the cable news world, is it's really important to understand the difference between op-eds, those are your opinion pieces, and they're almost always labeled, they should be labeled as such. It should be labeled as an opinion piece or as a letter to the editor. And those do not reflect the editorial positions or philosophies of the news staff. I think it's important to always keep that in mind. That is basically giving the newspaper's platform over to a reader for a moment. So understand the difference between that and editorials. When a newspaper does do an editorial, that does reflect the stance and position of the newspaper staff. That means the editor-in-chief and the publisher have come together to make a decision. And so you'll see things like that happen with, say, the Orlando Sentinel when they make a decision about endorsing a candidate. And they don't always endorse a candidate, but every now and then they will. Punditry. I get a lot of questions about punditry. Punditry is really what you see probably 90% of the time on cable news. They've really moved away from most reporting, unless we're talking about like disaster reporting, where they have like a reporter, you know, on the field in front of, say, the wildfires. Most of it is experts, and I'm going to put that in air quotes, experts opining of, you know, and doing analysis. I think analysis may be the most dangerous word in news right now. And so that's, that's not delivering the facts. That's me telling you what I think about this potential situation. And that's a pretty broad category of punditry. And when you're comparing organizations, so make sure that you're comparing that like to like. And then when you're looking just at, most of our, previously print news outlets have now moved into online sources. So when you're looking at those, even an online source, the anatomy of a news article really hasn't changed, even as we've moved from print into digital. So you want to check your dates, you want to check your bylines, and a regular news source may occasionally say by, a Sun Sentinel staffer or something like that, but most of the time they should give you the name of the actual reporter. And then you can Google that reporter, you can see what other, articles they've written. Their quotes should come from named sources. Sometimes we have to, news outlets have to use anonymous sources, but we provide as much detail and transparency even when they do that. And the links should always work. If you're seeing an article with a lot of broken links, generally garbage leads to garbage. And so that's a big red flag that may be a less than quality news source. So, sorry, I keep using so as a transition. The kind of big key here, the big key takeaway that I want for everybody to take with them is that everyone has their own responsibility. If we're going to protect our democracy, if we are going to overcome the disinformation disorder, we all have to take agency and responsibility for owning our social media space, and take responsibility for the accuracy and sourcing of the information that you're posting across social media. How do you do that? You share from credible media organizations and cite your source. And if you're worried, then find multiple sources for something. The example I give of this that happened really recently is the first time I ran across the story that came out of Portland, Oregon about federal police officers pulling protesters off of the street in unmarked vans. It was on Esquire. Esquire is a very reputable magazine, but the way the piece was written didn't sound like a journalist had written it. It was very emotional. It was very evocative. And so I thought, okay, before I knee-jerk react and share this, I want to make sure that this is really happening. I have a lot of friends in Portland. I don't want to send anybody into a panic, so I just took a second, opened a new window and Googled it and found, 4 or 5 more legitimate news organizations that were reporting the same thing, including the Washington Post. So at that point I was like, okay, now we can share. Like I said, beware the copy and pasted from a ... whatever that supposed expert is. If there's not a name there, you can't Google it, you don't know the quality of that information. If you are, sharing about celebrities or celebrity culture, you can always check for the verified checkmark on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. And I think the big key things are, if you don't know or aren't sure, simply don't post. And if you want to be really, really safe, create your own content and stay far, far away from the memes. That's the one that gets me in trouble the most with my own age bracket and demographic, and actually the millennials as well. This is a little cartoon that I stole from NPR's Life Kit that was really about sharing about misinformation. And it says, it encourages you to be skeptical. I like to encourage people to be curious. But it was really all about the fact that if you find something emotionally triggering, if it makes you angry or fearful, then it's probably designed to do that. And news is almost never designed to do that. So you want to take a moment and pause and, give yourself that breathing room to go ahead and be curious about it and check it. And then the big reason that I wanted to share this little cartoon is because of the emphasis on, if you see somebody spreading fake information, be kind, be gentle. The world is hard enough right now. I see a lot of vitriol online, and I think that we can combat a lot of this with a little bit of kindness and assuming best intent. And usually it's best if you see someone sharing misinformation to start a private conversation. So that is it. Do we want to talk? I've got maybe 10 minutes. So you can go straight into questions, or I could switch over and talk a little bit more about memes. Oh, last few things. So some good reads on here about just misinformation, disinformation in general. And then if anyone wants to fact check my sources on the platypus and George Washington's teeth, they're my sources. And then we can go into questions. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can maybe see the chat box.
Trinity, thank you. In the interest of time, I think we do have some questions, and I'm hoping
Okay.
Amanda has a list of them for you.
I do have a list, Joel. Thank you. Okay, I'll just get started because there are quite a few. First of all, what category of media do podcasts fall under in your list of types of media? Are they the out-of-home type of
They're
media?
digital, social. They fall under digital.
Digital?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there are some that are almost hybrids because there are some like that are produced by that you'll hear them on the radio, and so then they're initially produced for broadcast, but then they have an ancillary market that is digital. So if you're going online to download it or to stream it, then it's digital media.
Okay, thank you. Joel wanted to highlight that Lakeland now has a very succinct and easy to follow COVID-19 tracker for anybody who is looking for a good source. You should check out that.
We do, and because I said we should be transparent about funding, I also want to thank Lakeland Electric for being one of our sponsors. So thank you, Joel, and thank you, Lakeland Electric.
Okay, there's a question about how prevalent is voice manipulation over videos? Does that require a degree of sophistication that is rare, or is that a fairly common practice? And then a corollary question that followed up on that was, can you describe for the audience the term deep fake and how to spot deep fake posts or content?
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is getting into a place that is really terrifying, I'm not going to lie. Deep fake content, there's some great videos out there that you can watch, and it is where you can digitally manipulate somebody's face into being somebody else's. Usually you have to have a tremendous amount of footage of that person, but with public figures, that's easier to do. I mean, there are great deep fake videos where you basically morph Nicolas Cage into Tom Cruise or something like that, and then by the time they're done with it, you're like, that's 100% Tom Cruise, that's, yeah. And so, yeah, you can really create content that is, brand new and completely artificial out of something, and make it look like somebody said something that they never said. That's what deepfake is. I think that technology, I don't really have any current research on that. I can certainly look for some. I don't think it's really that widespread now. I think what we're seeing is still a very low-tech version of that, like what they did with Nancy Pelosi about 6 months ago. And they took some video of her and slowed it down to make it sound like she was, drunk and slurring her words, but it was basically an audio manipulation. There are ways for experts in that field to tell, when you're actually looking at the actual audio graph and things. I think it's easier to tell when it's manipulated than when you're just a consumer and seeing it and hearing it. So that is on the frontier. And so all of those things that have made our movies so fascinating to watch, all the same CGI technology that gave us a real life looking tiger in Life of Pi where there never was a tiger, all of that technology is becoming more and more available to an everyday consumer and can be used in some pretty nefarious ways. But I don't think we're seeing that yet. It's still pretty expensive technology. But there'll always be somebody who figures out how to do it on the cheap.
Right.
Yeah.
One more question, maybe, President Joel, and that is, you mentioned, Googling the source of potentially unreliable information, and the question is Google or really any other search platform actually an unbiased source as well, or don't they have filtering systems within their search algorithms that might drive misinformation as well?
Well, this gets into that platform versus publisher kind of conversation. So Google's not a publisher, so it is all driven by the algorithm. And so I think what I'm suggesting is you leverage that out, you leverage that search engine to try to find a publisher that is more trusted. And if you're finding multiple news, trusted news sites reporting on something, then I think you can, you can have greater confidence in that. But absolutely, yes. Google's algorithm, I don't think it's deliberately manipulating anything to deliver you fake news, because Google doesn't make money that way. Google makes money when you come back to them and use their search engine to find the information that you're looking for. And so to the extent that the free and fair market drives ethics with Google, they are reliable in trying to give you the best organic search experience on the web. If you're looking for some others, DuckDuckGo is more private and more secure. That's one that I know is kind of coming up in popularity. I'm a Gen Xer and a little resistant to change at this point, so I still rely on Google. But knowing what the, knowing what the sort of trade-offs there are. They have the best crawlers on the internet. They've indexed probably more of the internet than any other search engine has. And then you can also open, depending on what browser you're using, you can open an incognito window that'll let you search without it being biased by your previous search history. Because that's really what Google is doing. It's taking into account your search history. So every time that I go in and I say, like, I want Thai food, I don't have to write Thai food in Lakeland. It already knows, based on my search history, that I'm in Lakeland and I'm looking for Thai food. It also knows because I have Google Maps on my phone and it's reading my location. So, yeah. Does that make sense?
Fantastic. It sure does.
Okay.
And we do have to end it here. I just want to say, Trinity, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us. It's always nice to hear what Lakeland Now is up to. I think you guys are on to something really great. So it's a good organization. Yes, we do support it, but the interest of full disclosure, we also support the Ledger and LAL Today, I think it's called, and other organizations, because we want to see you guys be successful. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you all for having me today.
And I have this highly coveted notebook for you as a token of appreciation for you speaking with us today. Trust me, everybody in town wants one of these. So you'll be amongst the who's who.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to saying thank you to our guests and visiting Rotarians. Trey, can you take that?
Sure. And thanks to our guest, Carol Hornsby, guest of Don Selvage, and visiting Rotarian Doug McCall. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all for coming. Carol, we look forward to having you back for sure. Our weekly quote: you cannot simply trust everything you see on the internet. And of course, that's by Abraham Lincoln. Next week's program is Brian Haas, and he's going to give us a criminal justice update. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for our guest, Trinity. Thank you again for joining us and speaking with us. And we're going to call this meeting adjourned. We'll see you in a week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.